Trump's blame game crumbles. From shutdown, starvation, and immigrant death traps to militia mobs and dictator delusions. Voters just buried the GOP for good. Oh, here we go again, with Donald Trump pointing fingers at everything but the mirror this morning after election night turned into a Democratic demolition derby in Virginia. New Jersey, New York City, and California, he's out there on Truth Social, and in White House huddles with GOP senators blaming the government shutdown for the Republican rout. As if that's the whole story. Wake up, it's a symptom, not the disease. The GOP isn't just incoherent. They are a walking autopsy of their own failures. And if they can't see why voters booted them from power in races from Richmond to Newark to the Bronx, then they deserve the wilderness they are stumbling into. This isn't about one bad week of furloughs. It's about a regime that came in swinging the axe at the most vulnerable from day one. Slashing funding for the elderly, scraping by on Social Security, the disabled fighting for scraps in underfunded programs, and children, whose school lunches are now a luxury in this shutdown hellscape. Remember how they framed the Farm Bill back in July, not as a lifeline for struggling families, but as a bloated boondoggle ripe for cuts to pay for those glittering tax breaks for billionaires and corporations. That's not governance, that's grudge settling, and voters smelled the rot from miles away. But let's not stop at the budget bloodletting, because Trump's playbook kicked off with something far uglier. He unleashed his militia mob of terrorists on the streets, right out of the gate in his second term. Those ragtag enforcers in tactical gear and red hats weren't spontaneous, they were sanctioned. Squads greenlit by executive whispers and DOJ blind eyes to patrol neighborhoods, intimidate voters, and clash with anyone waving a sign that didn't say "Make America Great Again." Look at the footage from Portland last summer, where federal agents in unmarked vans snatched protesters off sidewalks. Or the Miami rally in September, where self-styled patriots turned a permitless march into a brawl with counter-demonstrators using bear spray and flagpoles as weapons. Trump didn't condemn it. He amplified it on his feed, calling them heroes defending the heartland against Antifa phantoms, as if those ghosts were burning cities when the real fires were the ones his rhetoric lit. He gave them permission to use force on civilians, immigrants, and people protesting peacefully. That's not law and order, that's Lord of the Flies with a presidential seal and last Tuesday voters in places like Fairfax County. Virginia didn't forget. They turned out in droves to flip the governor's mansion blue, remembering how those mobs made their streets feel like occupied territory. Enforcing laws to make us glorify him, that's the next layer of this nightmare. Isn't it the executive orders rolling out in February, mandating loyalty oaths for federal workers? Or the Education Department push in March to weave Trumpian history into school curricula, painting him as the savior who drained the swamp while conveniently erasing the indictments and insurrections. It's not subtle, it's a cult curriculum disguised as patriotism. And when states like Texas and Florida jumped on board with their own Don't Say Democracy acts banning books that don't toe the line, it wasn't about protecting kids, it was about papering over the past, with hagiography. Voters saw through it in New Jersey, where Mickey Sherrill held her seat by hammering home how these mandates turned classrooms into echo chambers and libraries into bonfires, now with the shutdown amplifying the absurdity. Imagine teachers unpaid and parents rationing meals while kids parrot praise for the man who pulled the plug. Abuse of power doesn't even begin to cover the rot at the core. Take the immigration facilities turned death traps under his watch. Reports from the border in April detailed how overcrowded centers in El Paso and Yuma became viral incubators for disease, with ventilators scarce and medical staff furloughed even before the shutdown hit full stride. At least a dozen immigrants died in custody from untreated infections or botched deportations. One Guatemalan mother, separated from her toddler, collapsed from dehydration during a holding pen blackout. That's not oversight, that's engineered cruelty. And when Congress tried to peek inside those hellholes in May, DHS barred the doors, citing national security as if child graves were state secrets. Nancy Pelosi and a bipartisan crew were turned away at the gate in Tucson, while Trump tweeted about fake news tours. The disrespect extended to women in the press, too. Remember the April White House briefing where Kayleigh McEnany, no wait, it's still her echo in the press room. But now with Caroline Leavitt snapping at CBS reporter Weijia Jiang, calling her questions on maternal mortality, rates a witch hunt because they highlighted how his health cuts spiked. Maternal deaths in red states by 24%. He treats female journalists like interruptions, not inquisitors smirking through their probes on Roe remnants or equal pay gaps, as if women's lives are punchlines for his base. The blame game against Democrats when we know it's him, and only him. That's the gaslighting that grinds gears. He's out there this morning at the senator's breakfast, claiming kamikaze Dems caused the shutdown by blocking his border wall billions, as if his veto threats weren't the roadblock from October. First, he acts like we're all rubes who can't connect the dots from his Mar-a-Lago golf carts to the empty federal coffers. But come on, the man who promised infrastructure every week since 2017, has delivered nada but potholes and excuses. Last night's losses in Virginia, where Abigail Spanberger trounced the GOP incumbent by 8 points, weren't about Nancy Pelosi. They were about a president who finger points faster than he fact-checks, robbing us blind and using the money against us. That's the financial felony at the heart of it. The 2025 budget reconciliation wasn't reconciliation, it was robbery. Trillions funneled to defense contractors and oil barons, while Snap took a 30% haircut, leaving 42 million Americans scrambling for cereal instead of steak. And now, with the shutdown dragging into week 6, those contingency funds courts ordered tapped are trickling out at half-strength judges. In Rhode Island and Massachusetts, slapped down the USDA freeze last Friday, but Trump's team dragged their feet, promising only partial November payouts, as if logistics were the issue, not leverage. He's starving us, while showing off on TV with his food and parties picture. This November, too, he's hosting a Halloween bash at the White House with gold leaf pumpkins and celebrity donors chowing on Wagyu, while across town in D.C. food banks report lines, wrapping 3 blocks for canned goods. That's taxpayer money wasted on his vanity feasts. $130 million from mystery donors like Timothy Mellon propping up military pay during the lapse, but Snap gets scraps. He couldn't care less about the optics or the outrage, because in his world excess is entitlement and austerity is for the ants. His careless emotions toward civilians, he can careless if they are sick and do not have health care. He can careless if they starve. That's the chilling indifference that sealed the electoral coffin. Look at the ACA sabotage in February, when his HHS axed subsidies for 10 million enrollees, spiking premiums 40% in rural Georgia and Oklahoma, places that went red in 2024, but flipped local races blue this week because grandma couldn't afford her insulin anymore, or the COVID-era telehealth expansions he let lapse in June, leaving veterans in isolated counties without virtual docs during flu season. Now layered with shutdown furloughs for CDC staff, outbreaks are spiking unchecked in Texas detention centers, and he's tweeting about witch hunts instead of wear masks, blowing up boats with no evidence. That's the rogue admiral routine from the Pacific Fleet ops in August, where Coast Guard vessels under Pentagon orders torched 3 suspected smuggling skiffs off Baja California. No manifests, just ash and accusations of cartel ties, later debunked by satellite logs showing fishing gear, not fentanyl. The Navy inquiry got buried under national security stamps while families in Ensenada mourned lost fishermen. Collateral in Trump's war on the border without borders. His hate towards all civilians seeps through in every offhand aside, like the July rally in Ohio, where he mused about using cities as practice grounds for the military and civilians one by one if they riot again. It wasn't hyperbole, it was a dog whistle to the base. And when January 6 vets got pardons in March, it emboldened the militias to test those boundaries in Chicago last month, clashing with BLM marchers over police funding cuts. Playing dictator, that's not hyperbole, it's the daily drill from suspending habeas corpus for border crossers in January to the April executive order, greenlighting indefinite detention for suspected Antifa affiliates. Without trial, he bypassed Congress like a bad habit, stacking the courts with. Loyalists who rubber stamp his whims remember the Ninth Circuit flip in February, when 3 Trump appointees gutted a habeas petition for 500 asylum seekers, calling it a national emergency privilege. That's not adjudication, that's adjudication theater, and the lack of knowledge about the world so far. Gone his whole administration called Antifa a terrorist group when Antifa is just a personality. Soldiers are Antifa. It means people who are patriots. Antifa isn't an organization, it's an idea. Anti-fascist, a stance against the brown shirts marching in broad daylight, but Trump's FBI under Kash Patel labeled it domestic enemy #1 in their March threat assessment, lumping Portland graffiti artists with ISIS cells while ignoring the real threats from his own rallygoers packing heat at polls in Georgia, last primary, mocking the Pope, mocking God, calling himself a king. That's the blasphemy buffet. From his Vatican visit snub in May, where he skipped the audience to golf in Scotland, instead, then tweeted the Pope was too woke on migrants, or the June prayer breakfast, where he quipped Jesus wouldn't turn away a wall builder, implying divinity for his deportation dreams and claiming God when he serves the devil. That's the ultimate con, invoking the Almighty for mass family separations, while his border czar Tom Homan oversees camps kids call ice boxes, wanting to remove our voting rights. To only serve him, the John Lewis Act died in the Senate again in April thanks to Mitch's ghost, but Trump's real push came in July with executive meddling in state election boards, purging rolls in Nevada and Arizona under fraud pretexts that yielded 0 indictments, just suppressed turnout in blue hoods. All the lies after lie after lie they all produce is so disgusting, from the big steel redux on election night claiming mail-ins rigged New York's mayoral, upset for Zoran Mamdani, to the shutdown spin that Dems want open borders health care for illegals when his own CBO scores show wall funds siphoned from Medicaid. There is more, but I will leave it there. This is why you are done. The GOP isn't rebounding. Thayer retreating voters didn't just reject candidates. They rejected the chaos, the cruelty, the carnival of incompetence that Trump turned the White House into, and that AI video circulating online doesn't help your case. The one with the deepfake Donald soaring over America in a golden blimp dumping feces on the masses, it's satire. But it lands because it mirrors the mess he's made every one of your actions. Hegseth's actions, Stephen Miller's still whispering venom in immigration memos that got 20 states sued for data sharing on SNAP recipients, tying food aid to deportation threats. Mike Johnson. And not swearing in Adelita. That's the cherry on top. House Speaker Johnson dragging his feet on confirming incoming Dem reps like Adelita Gonzalez from California's 41st, refusing the oath ceremony in October, citing procedural purity when everyone knows it's payback for her district's Prop 50 win. That little flip GOP seats blue. It tells us you are guilty as charged, a party so scared of fair maps and fresh voices they'd rather shut down than swear in the future. Let's drill deeper into this electoral earthquake, because Trump's blame game is a smokescreen for a smoldering bonfire of backlash. Start with the shutdown's human toll. It's not abstract, it's agony etched in empty pantries and eviction notices across the heartland. In Virginia, Fairfax County fed workers 40% of the local economy voted en masse against the GOP governor, hopeful because their paychecks evaporated October 1 and back pay promises ring hollow when rent due dates don't wait for Congress. In New Jersey, Atlantic City casino dealers and boardwalk vendors hit by tourism dips from national park closures turned out to re-elect Phil Murphy by double digits, not because of some blue wave magic, but because Trump's truth social taunt snap only when Dems cave landed like a gut punch to families already pinching pennies. And in New York City, Zoran Mamdani's win wasn't a fluke, it was fury. Channeled through youth turnout, 18 to 24-year-olds surged 35%, blaming the man who cut after-school programs, to fund his Space Force vanity project, and California Prop 50's passage wasn't a technicality. It was a tidal wave against gerrymandered gripes with 5 House seats teetering blue because Central Valley farm workers remember how USDA raids under Miller's watch deported their neighbors mid-harvest, leaving fields fallow and families fractured. But peel back the ballot box, and the real indictment is on Trump's reign of error from the jump. His inaugural address wasn't unity. It was ultimatum vowing to deport millions and build the wall bigger than ever, setting the tone for a term that's been tantrum after tantrum. The elderly slashing started with Medicare Advantage privatization in February, handing over decisions to Aetna execs, who denied 25% more claims than before, turning grandma's hip replacement into a HMO horror story. The disabled got hammered next with SSI work requirements, tightened so viciously that 300,000 lost benefits by June. Many wheelchair-bound vets from his forever wars now couch surfing because paperwork piled up during DHS purges, and children, the innocents caught in the crossfire with Head Start centers shuttering nationwide after education budget axes fell 15% in March, leaving toddlers in unlicensed daycares or home alone while parents hustled gig jobs sans overtime protections. His Labor Department killed those in April, claiming wage hikes kill jobs when data showed the opposite. Unemployment ticked up 0.4% in blue-collar sectors, but he spun it as winning. The militia mobilization was no accident. It was architecture. Stephen Miller and Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary pick, who got confirmed in January, despite January 6 ties, orchestrated joint task forces, blending active duty with civilian contractors from Blackwater Echoes to patrol hot zones. Miller testified in February hearings that Antifa was an existential threat, justifying the deploy. But when FBI stats showed 0 Antifa-linked fatalities versus 12 from right-wing extremists, it exposed the lie. Hegseth greenlit urban training exercises in Detroit and Phoenix last spring using abandoned blocks as mock battlegrounds, but locals reported live fire too close to homes. One Philly mom lost her dog to stray rounds, and Trump praised it as sharpening the tip of the spear. Giving permission for force came via that infamous March 15 memo loosening rules of engagement for Border Patrol, allowing non-lethal munitions on rock throwers, but videos showed rubber bullets cracking skulls of migrant moms shielding kids, and protesters in El Paso got tear-gassed for chanting Viva Mexico during a vigil. Civilians, immigrants, people protesting, all fair game in his zero-tolerance theater. Those laws enforcing glorification hit like a bad sequel to the loyalty purges Nixon dreamed of. Trump's April 10 order required feds to sign annual affirmations of America First fealty or face reassignments to Alaska outposts. 5,000 opted out and got shipped. The education mandate followed in May with civics standards were written to canonize the 45th as the disruptor who saved capitalism from itself, while downplaying Watergate as a deep state. Demo states like Oklahoma mandated Trump trivia on state tests, kids reciting his inaugural quotes like scripture, and when teachers in Austin, Texas refused, they got pink slips under newly minted insubordination clauses. It's not education, it's indoctrination. And the power abuse cascades from their immigration deaths tally 47 in facilities by October, per a clue logs from heatstroke in Arizona trailers to suicide in solitary at Otay Mesa during a July heat dome. And Congress barred entry peaked with that September showdown in El Paso, where AOC and Ted Cruz were denied access, while inside screams echoed from kids denied water. Trump called it a hoax tour, but whistleblowers leaked audio of pleas for mommy that chilled the nation. Disrespect for women in news cycles was peak misogyny reloaded. John got the brunt in April, but it was Sima Ghosh of Fox even who drew his ire in June for probing the WIC program cuts that left 1.2 million infants formula short during a shortage. He blamed on Biden ghosts then, but his FDA delays on imports were the culprit. He called her a gotcha gal on air, and the base cheered while maternal health cratered post-Roe codification, failed his admin defunded Planned Parenthood satellites in red. States driving a 19% uptick in eclampsia deaths per CDC, and blame on Dems when it's him solo. That's the solo act of delusion. This shutdown started with his October 1 veto threat on CR without wall money. Dems offered clean bills. 5 times he stonewalled tweeting they love illegals more than Americans, as if his 2024 win wasn't padded by Latino shifts in Florida. He's the architect pretending to be the victim, and we ain't dumb enough to buy it. Robbing blind with money weaponized. That's fiscal fascism 101. The July omnibus funneled $800 billion to defense, including $50 billion for Hegseth's drone swarms over Mexico, while SNAP eligibility tightened, excluding 2 million low-wage workers in meatpacking plants. His donor class, the Koch network, and Adelson's poured $400 million into super PACs that now fund anti-protest bonds in cities like Atlanta, where bail for jaywalking jumped 300%, starving us, while he feasts. The White House menu from October alone clocked $20,000 in caviar and Chateaubriand for state dinners, while SNAP households averaged $146 a month. Pre-cuts now halved by USDA foot-dragging courts. Ordered full contingency use November 1, but partial drips arrived November 4, leaving lines at Wegmans in D.C. Snaking for hours. He couldn't care less about sickness. Sans care. The ACA open enrollment sabotage in October delayed subsidies till December, spiking uninsured to $28 million per KFF. And starvation, the SNAP freeze first since 1961, hit November 1 with 16 million kids affected per Urban Institute. Hegseth diverted VA funds to border ops, leaving 100,000 vets without psych apts, careless as a cat with 9 lives he ain't got. Blowing boats, sans evidence. Pacific incidents tallied 5 by September. Coast Guard logs show skiffs sunk on hunches, no manifests. Just Mayday calls ignored. In one case, a Ecuadorian fisherman lost at sea. His family got a condolence tweet from state, but no apology. Hate for civilians. The Urban Practice memo from May 20 directed Marine reservists to simulate crowd control in Baltimore, using non-lethals on actors, but leaks showed real bystanders pelted in error. One Detroit elder hospitalized with rubber fragments in his lung. Playing dictator. The February suspension of posse comitatus for border ops let troops patrol I-10 corridors indefinite, and knowledge void. Antifa as terror when its anti-fascist ethos soldiers embody patriotism. Mocking Pope Francis in May for migrant pleas, calling him a globalist puppet and God. In June, speeches claiming divine right to the Oval while serving devilish deals with Putin per Mueller. Echoes voting rights stripped via executive nudges to secretaries. Purging 1.5 million from roles in GA as NV under fraud flags that flagged nothing. Lies disgusting. The election night fraud cries. Malin stole Nick when Mamdani won clean by 12 points, or shut down. Dems fault when his veto log says otherwise. And that AI vid, the deepfake blimp shitting on flyover country. It's crude, but cuts, because it captures the contempt every action from Hegseth's boat blasts to Miller's data grabs on SNAP users. Cross-checking with DHS save for deportation hits Johnson's oath delay on Adelita Gonzalez, a Latina rep-elect, whose district flipped on Prop 50 maps. He stalled her swearing in October 15, claiming paperwork, but really payback for challenging Calvert's grip. Guilty as charged. A cabal cornered, clinging to crumbs, while the Republic rises against them. This is your requiem, Trump. The people haven't forgotten. They've finally fought back, and the blue tide just cresting will drown your delusions for good. Now expand on the immigrant deaths, because that's the scar tissue that won't fade. The El Paso facility outbreak in April wasn't isolated. It was inevitable, with capacity at 150%. And AC units busted since January. Funding froze for maintenance. 18-year-old Diego Ramirez from Honduras aspirated on Vomit during a seizure, no epi on site. Because pharma bids went to wall contractors, his sister Maria testified in May hearings, tears streaming as she described the call from ICE, a body bag, not a boy. And the arrests turned executions in June. A Tijuana sweep netted 200, but en route to Ade 2 vans. Overheated in 110 degrees 1, driver a contract hire panicked, and tased a restrained man, sparking a pileup that killed 4, including a US citizen green card holder named Juanita Hernandez, just trying to visit family facilities, barred Congress in July, when AOC delegation arrived with bottled water. And notebooks, DHS Chief Wolf, no relation to the wolf at the door, claimed classified ops. But body cams leaked later showed kids drawing thank you cards to Obama while guards scrolled TikTok, disrespect to women news, amplified the horror, but Trump's inner circle doubled down Miller in a hot mic moment. To leave it called female reporters hysterical harpies for covering the femicide spike at the border where 300 women vanished in transit per un. Reports. Blame game peaks with the shutdown origin story. He vetoed the September CR demanding $25 billion for barriers, Dems countered with $10 billion plus disaster aid for Hurricanes Helene and Milton. He called it ransom, tweeted Dems prioritize drag shows over dams, as if his FEMA delays in NC weren't the real floodgate robbery. The omnibus he signed July 4 funneled $2 trillion to core tax-free, while MedWatch, the watchdog, tallied $500 billion in SNAP, Medicaid, SSI trims, using the savings for stock buybacks at Boeing and Exxon. He feasts at Mar-a-Lago November 3, a 500-guest gala with lobster thermidor. Catered by Ivanka Associates, costing $1.2 million public dollars per FOIA, while SNAP moms in Memphis trade plasma for Pampers, careless on health. The VA wait times ballooned 40% after Hegseth reassigned 2,000 docs to border psych units, leaving PTSD sufferers in limbo per VA IG report, and starvation. The partial SNAP payout November 4 hit 50% max, $146 per person, but with inflation at 5. 2 grocers up 12%, its crumbs boats blown August 15 off Cabo. A Coast Guard cutter shelled a panga on radar blip. No radio hail, later divers found coolers of tuna, not tar heroin. The skipper Salvador Perez, 52, father of 5, sunk with his craft. Hate speech, the May 20 Pentagon brief. Hegseth floated urban ranges for marksmanship, using Detroit lots as targets, and one by one he joked. But a stray round clipped a barber shop sign. Dictator moves. The January 25 order invoked emergency powers for 90-day detours on environmental reviews, letting Keystone XL2 zero bulldoze without IA. Ignorance Antifa brief in February. Patel told senators it's a foreign op, when FBI says it's decentralized. Vets mocking Pope in Rome, skip his mass for a Vatican gift shop spree. Calling Francis a commie cleric. God claims in Bible study photo ops with gilded pages open to mammon. Versus serving devil per the Ukraine aid holdover from 2024 echoes, voting the April DOJ suit against As Malin's chilled turnout by 8% in Maricopa. Lies the Nick Steele claim Mamdani's 58% was audited clean, but Trump cried fraud to fundraise $10 million. Overnight. I vid from a TikTok satirist November 3. Shows blimp Don dumping on DC, crowds its viral 5 million views, because it rhymes with reality. Hegseths. Pacific Pyres Millers, Snap Snoops Johnson's oath obstruction on Gonzalez, her October 20. Hearing stalled by quorum games when quorum was their guilty. The GOP grave they dug themselves, and were burying in ballots this week. Love you all always. Santiago, DC. Maria.